Hagia Sophia, the building that changed the world 3 times. Welcome. Today, I am going to tell you a story that will change everything you thought you knew about history. You might have heard about the Hagia Sophia before. Maybe you know it as a famous mosque in Istanbul, or perhaps you've seen pictures of its massive dome and thought it was just another beautiful building. But today, I am going to tell you the real story, the story that will make you understand why this one building has been at the center of world history for nearly 1,500 years. The Hagia Sophia is not just a building, it is a cathedral that became a mosque, then a museum, and then a mosque again. It is a symbol of empires rising and falling. It is a masterpiece of architecture that should have been impossible to build. It is a place where Christianity and Islam have both claimed their greatest triumph. And most incredibly, it is a building that was constructed in just 5 years and 10 months, something that would take decades even with modern technology. This is the story of Emperor Justinian, a man who dreamed of building something that would make him immortal. This is the story of 2 architects who achieved the impossible. This is the story of a building that survived earthquakes, wars, crusades, and conquests. And this is the story of how one structure became the most contested piece of architecture in human history. After listening to this, you will understand why the Hagia Sophia is not just a building, it is a monument to human ambition, faith, power, and the eternal struggle between civilizations. And this is not just a history lesson, this is a perfect story for your English listening practice. So sit back, relax, and let me take you on a journey through time, a journey of vision, obsession, destruction, and rebirth. Now, let's begin. The burning of Constantinople. To understand the Hagia Sophia, we must go back in time to January 13th, 532 AD. Imagine the greatest city in the world, Constantinople, the capital of the Roman Empire. This was not the old Rome. That Rome had fallen decades ago. This was the new Rome, the Eastern Roman Empire, what we now call the Byzantine Empire. Constantinople was the richest, most powerful city on earth. Its walls were unbreakable. Its markets were filled with silk from China, spices from India, and gold from Africa. The Hippodrome, a massive stadium, could hold 100,000 people who came to watch chariot races. But on this day, everything was burning. The air was thick with black smoke. Buildings that had stood for centuries were engulfed in flames. The streets were filled with screaming crowds. This was the Nika riots, one of the deadliest uprisings in history. Over 30,000 people would die in just 5 days. The mob was chanting Nika, Nika, which means victory, victory. But there would be no victory, only death and destruction. In the heart of this chaos stood the Hagia Sophia, the Church of Holy Wisdom. It had been the most important church in Christianity, built 100 years earlier, but now it was surrounded by rioters. They broke through its doors, they smashed its marble columns, they set fire to its wooden roof, and within hours, the great Hagia Sophia, the pride of Constantinople, was reduced to rubble and ash. Inside the palace, Emperor Justinian watched the city burn. He was 50 years old, a short man with a round face and piercing eyes. He had only been emperor for 5 years, and now his entire reign was collapsing. His advisors were telling him to flee the city. His generals were preparing ships to escape. Even his closest ministers said, "Your Majesty, we must leave. The city is lost." But then a woman spoke. Her name was Theodora, Justinian's wife and empress. But Theodora was no ordinary empress. She had been born into poverty, the daughter of a bear trainer at the Hippodrome. Some say she had been an actress and dancer, professions considered shameful at the time. She had risen from nothing to become the most powerful woman in the world, and she was not afraid. She stood before the terrified emperor and his fleeing advisors. Her voice cut through the panic like a blade. She said, "My opinion is that now is a poor time for flight, even though it may bring safety. Every man who is born into the light of day must sooner or later die, but for one who has been an emperor, it is unendurable to be a fugitive. May I never be separated from this purple robe, and may I not live on that day when those who meet me shall not address me as empress. If you wish to save yourself, O emperor, there is no difficulty. We have much money, there is the sea, here are the boats. But think whether after you have been saved, you would not gladly exchange that safety for death. As for me, I like the old saying, purple makes the best burial shroud. In other words, I would rather die as an empress than live as a coward." Her words struck Justinian to his core. He straightened his back, he looked at his generals, and he made a decision that would change history. He would not flee, he would crush the rebellion, and then he would rebuild. Within days, Justinian's general Belisarius trapped the rioters inside the hippodrome and massacred them. Over 30,000 people died. The rebellion was over, the city was saved. But Constantinople was in ruins, half the city had burned, the greatest church in Christianity was destroyed. And as Justinian walked through the ashes of the Hagia Sophia, he made a vow. He whispered to himself, "I will build something so magnificent that people will speak of it for 1,000 years. I will build a church so grand that it will prove God himself chose me to rule. I will build a dome so vast that it will touch the heavens." This was the moment the Hagia Sophia was truly born, not in stone and marble, but in the heart of an emperor who refused to be forgotten. There was just one problem. It was impossible. The Pantheon in Rome had a dome, but it was made of solid concrete and had thick walls to support it. Justinian wanted something different. He wanted a dome that seemed to float, held up by light itself, with massive windows that would flood the interior with divine light. The engineering required didn't exist. No architect had ever attempted such a thing. But Justinian found two men who said they could do it. Their names were Anthemius of Tralles and Isidore of Miletus. Anthemius was a mathematician and physicist, one of the greatest scientific minds of his time. Isidore was a master engineer who understood the properties of materials like no one else. Together, they told Justinian they could build his impossible dream. Justinian gave them unlimited resources. He ordered marble from all across the empire, green marble from Thessaly, purple porphyry from Egypt, yellow marble from Africa, white marble from the island of Proconnesus. He demanded 8 massive columns of green marble from the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. He brought craftsmen from every corner of the empire, stone carvers from Syria, mosaic artists from Alexandria, metal workers from Persia. And he gave them just 5 years to complete it. Over 10,000 workers labored day and night. The construction site never stopped. Justinian himself visited almost every day, inspecting the progress, demanding perfection. He was obsessed. His advisors warned him that the costs were bankrupting the empire. His ministers complained that he was spending too much on a church while wars raged on the borders. But Justinian didn't care. This was his legacy. This was his immortality. The greatest challenge was the dome itself. Anthemius and Isidore designed something revolutionary, a dome that was 102 feet in diameter, sitting on 4 massive pillars connected by curved triangular sections called pendentives. These pendentives were a breakthrough innovation that allowed the circular dome to rest on a square base. No one had done this before on such a scale. But there was a problem. Stone and brick are heavy. The weight of the dome would push outward, trying to collapse the walls. So Anthemius and Isidore came up with a brilliant solution. They built the dome from special, lightweight bricks made from volcanic pumice stone from the island of Rhodes. These bricks were so light that, according to legend, 12 of them weighed the same as one normal brick. They also designed a system of massive buttresses hidden in the walls to absorb the outward thrust, and they pierced the base of the dome with 40 windows, not just for light, but to reduce the weight even further. It was a masterpiece of mathematics, physics, and faith. As the dome rose higher and higher, people came from all over the city to watch. Some prayed, some were terrified. They said it was impossible, that the dome would collapse and kill everyone inside. But Anthemius and Isidore pressed on, and in 537 AD, just 5 years and 10 months after construction began, the Hagia Sophia was complete. Solomon, I have surpassed you. December 27, 537 AD, the day of the consecration. The entire city of Constantinople gathered to witness the unveiling of the Hagia Sophia. The doors opened, and people gasped. What they saw was beyond comprehension. The interior was vast, a space 269 feet long and 240 feet wide, but the dome was that stole every breath. It seemed to float in the air, suspended by light itself, with massive windows that would flood the interior with divine light. The walls were covered in polished marble that reflected light like mirrors. The floors were decorated with intricate geometric patterns. Massive chandeliers made of gold and silver hung from the ceiling, holding thousands of oil lamps that made the entire space glow like the inside of a jewel. The capitals of the columns were carved with delicate lacework patterns, covered in gold leaf that sparkled in the light. But the most breathtaking feature were the mosaics. The entire ceiling, the dome, the walls, everything was covered in millions of pieces of colored glass and gold tile. The gold tiles were made with real gold leaf sandwiched between layers of glass, so they reflected light in a way that seemed magical. In the half-dome above the altar was a massive mosaic of the Virgin Mary holding the infant Jesus, surrounded by angels. Emperor Justinian entered the church, walking slowly down the central nave. His eyes were fixed on the dome above. His tears streamed down his face. He raised his hands to heaven and shouted the words that would echo through history. "Solomon, I have surpassed you." He was referring to King Solomon, who had built the legendary temple in Jerusalem. Justinian believed that his Hagia Sophia was even greater than Solomon's temple, and in that moment, looking at the impossible dome floating above him, no one dared to disagree. The Hagia Sophia became the spiritual center of Christianity. For nearly 1,000 years, it was the largest cathedral in the world. Emperors were crowned beneath its dome, economical councils met within its walls, pilgrims traveled for months just to step inside and feel the presence of God. The Byzantine Empire saw it as proof of their divine right to rule, that God himself had allowed them to build something so magnificent. But life is unpredictable. Even the greatest achievements of human ambition can be destroyed in an instant. The first collapse. Just 20 years after the Hagia Sophia was completed, disaster struck. On May 7, 558 AD, a massive earthquake hit Constantinople. The ground shook violently. Buildings throughout the city collapsed, and then, with a sound like thunder, the eastern half of the great dome of the Hagia Sophia cracked and fell. Tons of stone, brick, and gold mosaic crashed down onto the floor below, destroying the altar and the eastern sections of the church. Miraculously, no one was inside at the time, but the damage was catastrophic. The impossible dome, the pride of the empire, lay in ruins. Justinian was devastated. He was now 76 years old, frail and weakened by age. He had survived wars, plagues, and rebellions, but seeing his greatest achievement destroyed broke his heart. The original architects, Anthemius and Isidore, were both dead. People said the dome could never be rebuilt. They said the ambition had been too great, that humans had tried to reach too high. But Justinian refused to give up. He called for Isidore the Younger, the nephew of the original architect. He ordered him to rebuild the dome, but this time to make it even better. Isidore studied the collapse and realized the original dome had been too flat, which put too much outward pressure on the walls. So Isidore designed a new dome that was 20 feet higher, with a steeper curve that directed the weight downward instead of outward. For 5 years, workers labored to rebuild. In 563 AD, the new dome was complete, stronger, taller, and even more magnificent than before. Justinian, now 81 years old, attended the consecration. It would be one of his last public appearances. He died 2 years later, in 565 AD. But his legacy lived on. The Hagia Sophia stood as a monument to his vision, his obsession, and his refusal to accept the impossible. For the next 900 years, the Hagia Sophia remained the heart of the Byzantine Empire. But empires, like domes, are fragile things, and a storm was coming from the west. The Rape of Constantinople. April 12, 1204, a day that would live in infamy. The Fourth Crusade had arrived at the walls of Constantinople, but these were not saviors, they were conquerors. Christian crusaders from Western Europe who had been sent to fight Muslims in the Holy Land had instead turned on their fellow Christians in Constantinople. Greed, politics, and religious rivalry had twisted their mission. Now they wanted to loot the richest city in the world. The Crusaders smashed through the walls. They poured into the city like a plague of locusts. What followed was one of the most horrific acts of destruction in history. For 3 days, the Crusaders pillaged, burned, raped, and murdered. They destroyed priceless works of art. They melted down bold statues and religious relics. They desecrated churches and monasteries. And they did not spare the Hagia Sophia. The Crusaders burst through its doors like barbarians. They tore down the silk curtains and altar cloths to use as cloaks. They smashed the silver iconostasis, the ornate screen that separated the nave from the altar, and melted it down for coins. They ripped the gold and silver from the walls. They even brought a prostitute into the church and sat her on the patriarch's throne, where she sang vulgar songs and danced while the Crusaders cheered. One chronicler wrote, "They spared nothing, neither religion, nor age, nor sex. They committed incest, adultery, fornication, in the presence of all. The holy places were filled with the bodies of the slain, and the streets ran with blood." The treasures of the Hagia Sophia were scattered across Europe. The 4 bronze horses that had stood above the entrance were stolen and taken to Venice, where they still stand today above St. Mark's Basilica. Precious relics, including parts of the True Cross, were shipped to churches in France, Italy, and Germany. The Crusaders crowned a Latin emperor and declared Constantinople part of their new Latin Empire. The Byzantine Empire was shattered. The Hagia Sophia, though still standing, was violated and broken. The Byzantines would eventually retake the city in 1261, but they were never the same. The empire was weakened, fractured, and dying, and lurking on the eastern horizon was a new power, one that would change everything. The Ottoman Turks were coming. The fall of Constantinople. May 29, 1453. The date that marked the end of an era. For 53 days, the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II had laid siege to Constantinople. He was just 21 years old, but he commanded an army of 80,000 men and the most advanced artillery in the world. His massive cannons, some weighing over 30,000 pounds, pounded the ancient walls of Constantinople day and night. Inside the city, Emperor Constantine XI led a desperate defense with just 7,000 soldiers. He knew the end was coming. On the night of May 28th, he attended a final service in the Hagia Sophia. The great church was packed with people, nobles, soldiers, priests, and common citizens, all praying for a miracle that would never come. Constantine knelt before the altar and prayed. Then he embraced his friends and said goodbye. He knew he would die the next day. At dawn on May 29th, the Ottomans launched their final assault. They poured through a breach in the walls like a flood. Constantine XI threw off his imperial regalia so he would not be recognized and charged into the battle. He fought until he was cut down, dying as a soldier rather than fleeing as a coward. His body was never found. By noon, the city had fallen. Ottoman soldiers raced through the streets, killing, looting, and capturing slaves. They had been promised 3 days of plunder, a traditional reward for conquering a city. The richest, most magnificent city in the Christian world was now at their mercy. And then they reached the Hagia Sophia. Thousands of people had taken refuge inside, believing the church was a sanctuary. They were praying, weeping, holding their children. Some believed an old prophecy that said an angel would descend from heaven when the Turks reached the church and drive them back. But no angel came. The Ottoman soldiers smashed through the doors. They killed the priests at the altar. They tore people from the pews and dragged them outside to be sold as slaves. They stripped the church of anything valuable: gold, silver, gems, silk, anything they could carry. But when Sultan Mehmed II entered the Hagia Sophia, he stopped. He looked up at the great dome, and he was overwhelmed. He had never seen anything like this in his life. The beauty, the scale, the sheer magnificence of the space, it took his breath away. He ordered his soldiers to stop the destruction immediately. Then he did something that shocked everyone. He climbed to the top of the altar and he declared, "This church will now become a mosque. It will be called Hagia Sophia, and it will stand as the greatest mosque in my empire." Mehmed understood what Justinian understood 900 years earlier, that this building was more than stone and marble. It was a symbol of power, a declaration to the world. By converting the Hagia Sophia from a church to a mosque, Mehmed was proclaiming that the Islamic world had conquered the Christian world, that a new empire had risen on the ruins of the old. The transformation. Mehmed ordered immediate changes to transform the Hagia Sophia into a mosque. The Christian mosaics and frescoes were covered with plaster, not destroyed but hidden. Islamic law forbids images of living beings in mosques, so the faces of Jesus, Mary, and the saints were concealed beneath whitewash. In their place, massive circular calligraphic panels were hung, bearing the names of Allah, Muhammad, and the first 4 caliphs in beautiful Arabic script. A mihrab, a niche indicating the direction of Mecca, was installed in the southeastern wall. A minbar, a pulpit for the imam, was built. Outside, 4 towering minarets were constructed at the corners of the building, transforming its silhouette from a Christian cathedral into an Islamic mosque. The Ottomans also added massive buttresses to the exterior to stabilize the aging structure. They reinforced the dome, which had been damaged by earthquakes over the centuries. In a way, they saved the Hagia Sophia from collapse. They loved the building just as the Byzantines had, and they poured resources in preserving it. For the next 481 years, the Hagia Sophia served as a mosque. 5 times a day, the call to prayer echoed from its minarets across Istanbul. Ottoman sultans added their own touches: elaborate chandeliers, intricate tile work, libraries, and tombs. The Hagia Sophia became the model for Ottoman mosque architecture. The great architect Mimar Sinan studied its structure when designing the Suleymaniye Mosque and the Blue Mosque. But while the building thrived under Ottoman care, a question began to emerge in the minds of historians, archaeologists, and Christians around the world. What happened to the original Byzantine mosaics beneath the plaster? The Museum Era. When World War I ended and the Ottoman Empire collapsed, a new nation emerged, the Republic of Turkey, led by Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. Ataturk was a revolutionary who wanted to transform Turkey into a modern, secular state. He abolished the caliphate, replaced Islamic law with secular law, and gave women the right to vote. He also made a controversial decision about the Hagia Sophia. In 1935, Ataturk declared that the Hagia Sophia would no longer be a mosque. Instead, it would become a museum, a symbol of Turkey's secular identity and a monument to both Christian and Islamic heritage. This decision shocked many Muslims, who saw the Hagia Sophia as one of Islam's holiest sites. But Ataturk was firm. He believed the Hagia Sophia belonged to all humanity, not just one religion. As a museum, the Hagia Sophia underwent a dramatic transformation. Archaeologists and art historians from around the world descended on Istanbul. They carefully removed the plaster that had covered the Byzantine mosaics for 500 years. What they discovered was breathtaking. Original mosaics from the 9th, 10th, and 11th centuries, preserved in stunning detail. The most famous mosaic shows Christ Pantocrator, Christ the Almighty, in the southern gallery. Jesus sits on a throne, his right hand raised in blessing, his face serene and powerful. The mosaic is made of millions of tiny gold and colored glass tiles, arranged so skillfully that Jesus' face seems almost alive, changing expression as you move around it. Another mosaic shows the Virgin Mary flanked by Emperor Constantine, who offers her a model of the city of Constantinople, and Emperor Justinian, who offers her a model of the Hagia Sophia. It is a reminder of the building's Byzantine origins. In the imperial gate above the main entrance is a mosaic of Emperor Leo VI prostrating himself before Christ. These mosaics had been hidden for nearly 500 years, preserved beneath the plaster like time capsules. For 85 years, the Hagia Sophia stood as a museum. Over 3 million people visited each year. It became a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Scholars studied its architecture, its art, its history. It was seen as a triumph of cultural preservation, a place where Christian and Islamic heritage coexisted peacefully. But the story of the Hagia Sophia was far from over. The return to a mosque. On July 10, 2020, the world was shocked by an announcement from Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. After 85 years as a museum, the Hagia Sophia would be reconverted into a mosque. The decision sparked immediate international controversy. UNESCO condemned the decision, saying it violated the Hagia Sophia's status as a World Heritage Site. The Greek government called it an insult to Christianity. The Russian Orthodox Church expressed deep regret. Leaders from around the world urged Turkey to reconsider, but Erdogan was unmoved. He argued that the 1935 decision to make the Hagia Sophia a museum was illegal, that Ataturk had overstepped his authority. He said the building had been a mosque for 481 years and should return to its Islamic identity. On July 24, 2020, for the first time in 86 years, Friday prayers were held inside the Hagia Sophia. Tens of thousands of Muslims gathered outside, praying on the streets as the call to prayer echoed from the minarets. Inside, the Byzantine mosaics were once again covered during prayer times, not with plaster this time, but with curtains and lights that obscure them from view. The building is now open to tourists outside of prayer times, but it functions as an active mosque. The transformation was complete. The Hagia Sophia had changed religions once again. The decision revealed something fundamental about the Hagia Sophia. It has never been just a building. It has always been a symbol, a battleground for competing visions of identity, faith, and power. For Christians, it represents the lost glory of Byzantium and the tragic fall of Constantinople. For Muslims, it represents the triumph of Islam and the greatness of the Ottoman Empire. For secularists, it represented the possibility of shared heritage transcending religious division. The Hagia Sophia forces us to confront difficult questions. Who has the right to decide what a building means? Can architecture ever be neutral? Does a building belong to the people who built it, the people who conquered it, or the people who live near it today? There are no easy answers, but one thing is certain: the Hagia Sophia will continue to be contested, debated, and fought over for as long as it stands. The legacy of Justinian's dream. Nearly 1,500 years after Emperor Justinian vowed to build something immortal, the Hagia Sophia still stands. It has survived earthquakes, more than 30 major quakes over the centuries. It has survived wars, crusades, and conquests. It has been a cathedral, a mosque, a museum, and a mosque again. It has witnessed the rise and fall of empires. It has been the stage for some of history's most dramatic moments. But beyond the politics and religion, the Hagia Sophia remains one of humanity's greatest architectural achievements. Modern engineers who study the building are still amazed by what Anthemius and Isidore accomplished. The pendentive dome design they pioneered became the foundation for Islamic architecture. The great mosques of Istanbul, Isfahan, and Delhi all trace their lineage back to the Hagia Sophia. The building has inspired architects for 1,500 years. When Michelangelo designed the dome of St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, he studied drawings of the Hagia Sophia. When Christopher Wren designed St. Paul's Cathedral in London, he was influenced by its proportions. The United States Capitol building, with its famous dome, echoes the design principles first established in Constantinople. Visitors who enter the Hagia Sophia today, whether as worshippers or tourists, still feel what people felt in 537 AD: awe. The space is overwhelming. The dome still seems to float. The light still streams through the windows in shafts of gold. The scale is still breathtaking. Standing beneath that dome, you can feel the weight of history. You can imagine Emperor Justinian walking these floors, tears streaming down his face as he whispered, "Solomon, I have surpassed you." You can picture the Crusaders looting the treasures, the Ottoman soldiers storming through the doors, Mehmed II looking up in wonder. You can sense the prayers of millions, Christian and Muslim, who have knelt in this space over 15 centuries. The Hagia Sophia proves something profound, that human beings, driven by faith and ambition, can create something that transcends their own lifetimes. Justinian died 1,460 years ago, but his dream still stands. Anthemius and Isidore, the brilliant architects who solved the impossible puzzle, have been dead for 1,500 years, but their masterpiece endures. In a world where empires crumble and ideologies fade, the Hagia Sophia remains, a testament to what humans can achieve when they refuse to accept limitations, when they dare to build the impossible. The building that belongs to everyone. Today, if you walk through the streets of Istanbul and approach the Hagia Sophia, you will see something remarkable. You will see tourists from every corner of the world, Christians, Muslims, Jews, Hindus, atheists, people of every background, all gathered to witness this marvel. some come to pray, some come to admire the art, some simply to stand beneath the dome and feel small in the face of something greater than themselves. This is the ultimate legacy of the Hagia Sophia. It does not belong to one religion or one empire, it belongs to humanity. It is proof that we can create beauty that transcends borders, faith, and time. It reminds us that the greatest human achievements are not weapons or walls, but spaces that inspire wonder and awe. The story of the Hagia Sophia is not just about emperors and architects, mosaics and minarets. It is about the human need to build something eternal, to leave a mark that says we were here and we mattered. It is about the drive to create beauty in a world of chaos. It is about faith, not just religious faith, but faith in the possibility that we can achieve the impossible if we dare to try. And that is why the Hagia Sophia will live forever. Long after our names are forgotten, long after the empires of today have crumbled into dust, that great dome will still float above Istanbul, still catching the light, still inspiring awe in everyone who sees it. It stands as a reminder that we are capable of greatness, that our dreams can outlast our lives, that the impossible is only impossible until someone does it. The Hagia Sophia is not just a building, it is a monument to the indomitable human spirit, a spirit that refuses to be defeated, refuses to be forgotten, refuses to accept that anything is truly impossible. And that is the real story of the Hagia Sophia, a story that began 1,500 years ago and continues today, a story that will echo through the ages for as long as humans dream of touching the heavens.